Thanks very much, Alec and Matt. That was great, and I'm sure there'll be lots of questions at the panel discussion at the end, but thank you again for coming all this way to speak to us. We greatly appreciate it. So kind of following on a bit on the hemodynamics and about good baseline assessment, Gareth is going to speak to us. Gareth's the lead research nurse for the 2 BASIL trials, and we've been working together on the BASIL trial for, well, BASIL 1, BASIL 2, and BASIL 3, 18 years. In fact, it's his fault. I said to him about 10 years ago, I am never going to do another BASIL trial, and here I am, so it's all your fault, Gareth.
It is. It is. I apologise to everybody.
I forgive you.
Thank you. This is going to be a little bit repetitive based on what Matt and Alec have just been saying and what Jonas was saying earlier, but Andrew's asked me to talk about this, so who am I to say no? With regards to consent, it's become apparent to me travelling to many of the centres that are participating in these trials that, particularly in some of the less well-established academic centres, it's generic research nurses, by and large, who are running these trials, rather than members of the vascular department. And I think when it comes to consenting patients for these trials and talking to them about the trials, whilst it's fine for research nurses, generic research nurses, to hand the patient the information sheet and, if they're on the delegation log, to do so to get the patient to sign the consent form, it is slightly unfair to expect them to discuss details of the trial and the potential interventions involved with patients. And I think that is beholden upon the clinical experts, whether that's surgeons or radiologists or whether that's clinical nurse specialists. It has to be somebody with a knowledge of the condition and a knowledge of the interventions involved who talks to the patient about this. As Matt was just saying, I use many of the same lines when I talk to patients. I explain to them that this is not a trial of whether they should have intervention. That's already been decided. They need to have intervention. It's just a question of which intervention is best for them. I reassure them that if it was obvious that one or the other intervention was better than the other for them, that is the intervention they would be getting. And it's only because it is not obvious that we're talking to them about the trial. There's this thing about having 24 hours to consider the patient information sheet. That's not strictly speaking true. They have to have sufficient time to consider it, to discuss it with their family and friends if they want to, before they sign the consent form, but it doesn't have to be 24 hours. So if there is clinical urgency to get on with treatment, we can still consider the patients for the trial. With regards to advantages of patients joining in the trial, I say to them there aren't that many. They may get followed up a little bit more closely if they're in the trial than they would do if they were just an NHS patient. And they may get a warm, rosy glow knowing that they're going to help answer this question for patients who are coming along in the future. Certainly those are true for the BASIL 2 trial. With regards to the BASIL 3 trial, they also have a chance of getting a new technology which is not currently available by and large on the NHS. So those are the advantages to the patients. When it comes to randomisation, I'd just like to echo what Jonas was saying earlier, and that it's perfectly possible and acceptable to consent the patient before you know that they're actually eligible for the trial. Both trials now allow on-table randomisation. So you can potentially duplex a patient, identify them as potentially suitable, and consent them before they ever go to the interventional room to get a DSA. With regards to the randomisation process, the easiest way to do this is online, providing somebody has the login credentials. You can do this 24/7, but there is also a telephone backup. Just talking about baseline assessment now, and this is going to be a bit like, you've heard it all before several times. The reason that we do this baseline assessment form is that we're trying to accurately define the patient population who is going into our trial. And it's really important that we record hemodynamic data for all of the reasons that Matt has just set out. And I have to say that we're not very good at doing this. For some reason in the UK, doing ankle pressures seems to have fallen out of favour. I don't know why, but in many of the units that we visited up and down the country, they say that they no longer do ankle brachial pressure index as a routine assessment. Whether this is because we tend to have, or many centres now have vascular technologists and portable duplex machines in the clinic, so we just skip the ABPI and go straight to a duplex. I don't know. But in the BASIL 3 trial, of the 360 something odd patients who have been randomised so far, only 49% of them actually have had baseline hemodynamic data recorded on their baseline form, which is not great. Thankfully, in the West Midlands, which is the area that I cover, we've achieved 90%, so it's possible to do it. BASIL 2 is better. 75% of patients randomised into the BASIL 2 patient have hemodynamic data, and in the West Midlands, it's 93%. So I'd just like to urge you all to make a special effort, even if it's just for the trial, to record baseline hemodynamics on your patients who are entering the trial. I have to say that we all should be shamed, though, by Jonas's efforts in Sweden. 100% of the BASIL 2 patients randomised in Sweden have had hemodynamic data recorded. So it's a big up to Jonas and his team, I think, for that. That's something to be proud of. The reason, as Matt has already alluded to, that we are very keen to have the hemodynamic data is because it forms a part of the Wi-Fi scoring system which we are using in this trial. Just to remind you, Wi-Fi stands for Wound Ischemia and Foot Infection Score, and it's a way of accurately describing, hopefully, the patients that are entering this study. So please make an effort for us and record ankle pressures if you can. Again, for those centres who are relying on generic research nurses to complete the CRFs, it is likely that they're not going to have the skills to do this. So please, somebody with the clinical skills, get on and do it. It doesn't take very long. Very thankful to Steve from Huntley, who's come along today as well to show us all of his toys over in the corner. So if you haven't already spoken to Steve, please do so and have a look at the stuff that Huntley are producing these days. It's very, very affordable and very useful. With regards to follow-up, the most important aspect of the follow-up data that we're interested in is really the patient-reported outcomes, the follow-up booklet, which is a little bit hard work, I have to say. But this can all be done remotely by post and by telephone if it's not possible for the patients to attend the hospitals. I'm conscious of the fact in the West Midlands that we have a very dense population in a fairly small geographical area, but that's not true of many areas. And rather than asking patients to travel many, many miles to come back to hospital for appointments, it's possible to post these booklets out with a stamped addressed envelope, get the patient to send them back, and then when they come back, the research nurse can check them for completeness, telephone the patient. If there's any missing questions, they can be completed over the phone, and the health economic data on the last 2 pages can also be completed over the phone. The follow-up form itself, again, most of this can be done retrospectively. The only bit that can't be done retrospectively is the hemodynamics, but really for follow-up, this is the least important aspect of the follow-up. Again, if you've got very friendly practice nurses or district nurses, they may help you out with this. But if you can't get the patient back to the hospital and you can't do hemodynamics, then that's fine, we'll accept that. The rest of the form, again, can be completed remotely by asking the patient over the phone, telephone the patient's community nurses, or asking the GP, etc. That's about it, thank you.